Most people think boundaries are all about saying no. That is not quite right. The one boundary toxic people truly cannot handle is not loud, not dramatic, and definitely not some polished speech you rehearse in the mirror. It is the moment you stop explaining yourself to people who were never listening in the first place. That is what unsettles them. Not your anger, not your sadness, but your clarity. Because the instant you stop giving them access to your reasons, your guilt, and your emotional energy, their entire game begins to collapse. People will tell you to communicate more, to be gentler, to make them understand. That is not how this works. By the end of this, you will understand the one boundary that exposes fake respect, shuts down manipulation at the root, and protects your peace without a fight. I learned this the hard way. I used to believe boundaries meant giving a clear explanation so no one could twist my intention. So I explained, then explained again. And somehow, the more I explained, the less respect I received. That was the turning point. I realized toxic people do not use your explanations to understand you. They use them to control you. And once I stopped handing over that access, everything shifted. So let's break this down. The first thing is the no explanation boundary. This is the one boundary toxic people cannot tolerate. It is simple. You stop over-explaining your limits, you stop defending your choices, you stop giving long emotional speeches to people who already benefit from ignoring your needs. Most people assume a boundary becomes stronger the more detail you add. But here is what is really happening. Every extra sentence gives a manipulator something to grab, twist, question, and turn against you. The real strength is not in a better argument. It is in a clean line. Picture this. A friend keeps dumping last-minute problems on you. Every time they call, it is chaos. They need a favor. They need money. They need your time. You finally say you cannot do it anymore. Instead of accepting it, they hit you with, wow, after everything I have done for you, or maybe it is family. You say you are not coming to another guilt-filled dinner, and suddenly you are selfish, cold, disrespectful. So what do? You start explaining, you talk about work stress, you talk about your mental state, you talk about being exhausted, you keep talking, and somehow by the end, you are the one apologizing. That is not communication, that is a trap. Here is what is really going on in their mind. Toxic people do not panic when you set a boundary. They panic when you set one they cannot negotiate. The reason they push back is simple. Your explanation gives them a doorway. If you say you are tired, they say it is only for an hour. If you say you are busy, they tell you to make time. If you say you are hurt, they say you are too sensitive. They are not responding to your reason. They are testing your weakness. This is a classic manipulation move. They know if they can keep you talking, they can keep you doubting. And here is the part most people miss. The toxic person is not confused by your boundary. They understand it perfectly. They just hate that it applies to them. So what do you say? Simple. Say exactly, that does not work for me. That is it. No explanation, no long speech, just those words. If they push, say, I already answered that. That is it. No explanation, no extra effort, just those words. You are not being rude. You are removing the handles they usually grab onto. That is why this boundary is so effective. It is smooth, it is clean, and it gives them nothing to work with. Picture another scenario. Your boss keeps texting after hours, not because it is urgent, but because they know you always reply. You decide to stop. The next morning, they act irritated. They say, I guess I just cannot rely on you anymore. Most people instantly jump into defense mode. They start explaining they were asleep, they had family things, they needed rest, they were not ignoring anyone. That is the mistake. The moment you defend yourself, the conversation stops being about access. Now it becomes a trial, and you are standing there trying to prove you are still a good person. That is exactly where toxic people want you. Here is the psychology behind it. Toxic people survive on what you can call emotional rent. They want to live in your head without paying for it. They want instant access, instant replies, instant compliance, instant guilt. The no explanation boundary cuts off that supply. It is like closing a gate without announcing it over and over. And once that gate shuts, their discomfort shows up fast. Why? Because they can no longer control the conversation through confusion. Now they are facing a solid wall, not a loud wall, a quiet one. And quiet boundaries scare manipulators more than angry speeches ever will. So what do you say? Simple, say, I am available during work hours. That is it. No explanation, no extra words. If they try to guilt you, say, that is my limit. That is it. No explanation, no long speech, just those words. Notice the pattern. Short line, no defense, no emotional leakage. That is how you keep your power. And here is where it gets interesting. The no explanation boundary does more than stop one bad behavior. It exposes who was only comfortable with you when you were easy to access. That is the real reveal. Healthy people may not love every boundary, but they can respect one. Toxic people cannot. Why? Because your over-explaining was never just words to them. It was leverage. It was the rope they used to pull you back in. When that rope disappears, their real character shows up. That is why some people get aggressive the moment you become calm. That is why some people call you difficult the moment you become clear. That is why fake friends suddenly act hurt when you stop being convenient. You are not becoming cruel. You are becoming unavailable for manipulation, and there is a massive difference. Picture this. You tell someone, I am not discussing this anymore. They laugh. They push. They try one more guilt line. Then they switch tactics. Now they are suddenly the victim. Now they are telling others you have changed. Now they are hinting that you think you are better than everyone else. It sounds familiar because it is. That reaction tells you everything. A normal person hears a limit. A toxic person hears a loss of control. That is why their response often looks bigger than the boundary itself. It is not about the sentence. It is about the access they just lost. Here is what nobody tells you. The first few times you use this boundary, it will feel unnatural. You will want to explain. You will want to soften it. You will want to rescue the other person from the discomfort of hearing no. Do not do it. That discomfort is not an emergency. Let it sit. Let the silence exist. Count to 3 in your head. 1, 2, 3, then stop talking. This is emotional self-defense, not punishment, not revenge. Protection. Your silence after the boundary is part of the boundary. Remember that. Because toxic people are experts at waiting for the extra sentence. The extra sentence is where they regain control. Never hand it over. So what do you do in the moment? Simple. Do nothing. Keep your face relaxed. Keep your tone steady. Let the room go quiet. If they push again, say, my answer is the same. That is it. No explanation, no added words, just that line. It is powerful because it tells them the door is closed, not slightly open, closed. And once toxic people realize they cannot pull you into a debate, one of two things happens. They either back off or they get louder. Either way, you learn who they really are. That is a win. And here's the part most people overlook. This one boundary does not just protect your time, it protects your identity. Because every time you over-explain yourself to a toxic person, you send your nervous system a dangerous message. You tell yourself your no is not enough. You tell yourself your comfort needs a justification. You tell yourself your peace must be earned. That is the slow damage. But the moment you say less and mean more, everything changes. You stop performing. You stop begging to be seen as reasonable. You stop managing other people's reactions like it is your responsibility. That is where respect actually begins. Not when they approve, but when you stop needing their approval. So what is the one boundary toxic people cannot handle? It is this, a clear limit with no explanation attached. Not cold, not cruel, not dramatic. Just firm, just calm, just final. Say exactly no. Or say clearly, that does not work for me. Or simply say, my answer is the same. Choose the one that fits your situation, then hold your ground inside it. Because the power is not only in the phrase itself, it is in what you refuse to add after saying it. But here is the deeper truth behind all of this. The boundary toxic people can never handle is not just your no, it is your no without guilt attached to it. That is what breaks the pattern. That is what exposes the manipulator. That is what makes fake respect fade away and real respect begin to appear. And once you truly understand that, you stop feeling like prey. You start moving like someone who knows they do not need permission to protect their peace. Here is the reality most people miss. Toxic people do not hate boundaries because they are confused. They hate boundaries because boundaries reveal exactly where their control stops. That is why the no explanation boundary hits so hard. It does not give them anything to twist, anything to argue, anything to weaponize. It forces their insecurity into the open. And once you recognize that, everything starts to shift. Their pushback says more about their fear than it ever does about your character. Their anger says more about their entitlement than about your tone. Their guilt trips say more about their weakness than about your boundary. When you really see that clearly, you stop taking their reactions personally. But here is the twist most people are not ready for. The more comfortable you become with saying less, the less drained you feel around toxic people. You stop carrying conversations that were never meant to be fair. You stop trying to earn basic respect from people who are committed to misunderstanding you. And over time, something bigger begins to happen. You stop being the easy target. You are not too harsh. You were simply conditioned to over-explain to people who were too self-centered to respect a simple no. That conditioning ends here. A boundary that is explained too much turns into a negotiation. A boundary that is held in silence becomes power. Pick this one boundary, just one. Try it this week and notice what changes. Pay attention to where you feel the urge to explain and stop yourself there.